Professional golf's next era is being shaped by a clash between two men who built their careers in almost opposite ways. Brian Rolapp spent more than 20 years inside the National Football League, eventually rising to Chief Media and Business Officer before taking over as PGA Tour CEO. His identity was forged around broadcast contracts, ratings numbers, and the centralized control that turns a sport into a media empire. Bryson DeChambeau took the opposite route. After leaving for LIV Golf in 2022 on a deal reportedly worth more than $100 million, he built a personal media operation from scratch, growing a YouTube channel that had surpassed 2.69 million subscribers by 2026. One man now runs a league. The other built a league of one. That contrast sits at the heart of everything unfolding between them. Neither man's position happened by accident. Rolapp was recruited specifically because tour leadership wanted an executive fluent in streaming rights and media economics. DeChambeau, meanwhile, walked away from the tour in 2022 at the height of its bitter rivalry with LIV, betting that a Saudi-funded contract and full creative control were worth more than staying inside golf's traditional structure. For years on, both bets are being tested simultaneously, with real money riding on what each man decides next. DeChambeau has never pretended his career isn't run like a business. He said plainly that his LIV contract functioned as the financial foundation that allowed him to pour time and money into content creation instead of chasing world ranking points. In his own framing, the deal was never just a paycheck, it was startup capital for a media company he intended to keep operating long after his competitive days slow down. Few golfers have talked about their contracts in those terms, and that mindset explains why conventional pressure points, scheduling demands, tour politics, public criticism, haven't moved him much so far. The friction between the two men predates any single meeting. Rolapp arrived with a mandate to fix what insiders called a bloated, inconsistent calendar, building his strategy around what he calls the pillars of scarcity, simplicity, and parity. By June 2026, the tour's board had signed off on his signature initiative, a new two-tier competitive structure launching in 2028. DeChambeau, for his part, had spent years positioning himself as an entrepreneur first and a tour employee a distant second, someone who treats his personal brand, YouTube channel, and golf equipment ventures as central to his identity as his two US Open titles. Rolapp wanted uniformity. DeChambeau wanted leverage. That tension was simmering long before the two-tier plan became public. The real controversy centers on the new structure itself. Unveiled ahead of the Travelers' Championship, Rolapp's plan splits the tour into a championship series of roughly 23 to 24 events, including the majors, the Players' Championship, and the season's richest paydays, and a Challenger series of at least 20 events carrying $4 million purses. Every championship series event guarantees a minimum $20 million purse, but sponsor exemptions vanish completely at that level. Movement between tiers runs on promotion and relegation. A top 20 season finish, or 2 wins, moves a player up, falling short sends them down. For someone like DeChambeau, who's spent years entirely outside the tour, that raises an obvious question: where would he even re-enter the system? The scale of this shift is significant. Today's schedule runs from January through late August with a comparatively open field. The new structure compresses that to 24 to 26 events total, at least 8 fewer than players compete under now. For decades, sponsor exemptions let organizers handpick a rising amateur, a hometown name, or a past champion regardless of ranking. Under the championship series, that tool disappears, replaced by a strict, results-only ladder. Supporters call it meritocracy in its purest form, detractors call it a system that locks in whoever's already on top. Current tour players don't agree on any of this, which proves this isn't simply a story of one rebellious star against one CEO. Rory McIlroy gave a mixed assessment, warning that lower-tier events risk turning into what he called a glorified Corn Ferry Tour. Lucas Glover, who chairs the Players' Advisory Council, defended the overhaul outright, arguing that change is difficult but sometimes unavoidable. Others, including Nick Taylor, worried openly about being shut out of historic national championships depending on which tier they land in. Xander Schauffele and Billy Horschel both spoke in favor of a stricter, results-driven system. The tour's own materials lean on the word meritocracy and promise greater competitive clarity. So even before LIV players enter the conversation, the plan already splits opinion inside the tour's existing membership. Layer DeChambeau on top of that, and the stakes climb considerably. Reports place him in contact with tour officials at Augusta National during Masters Week in April 2026, with separate reporting describing meetings between DeChambeau and tour president Scott O'Neill. Rolapp, meanwhile, has reportedly met with several stars, including sessions around the CJ Cup Byron Nelson, to preview the two-tier concept directly. None of this points to a single dramatic confrontation or ultimatum. It shows a slower, messier negotiation playing out over months, between a league remaking its structure and a star who walked away on his own terms in 2022. Here's what's confirmed: DeChambeau was extended the same return offer given to Brooks Koepka, Jon Rahm, and Cam Smith. Koepka took it. DeChambeau, Rahm, and Smith all said no. As Golf Digest put it, the complication for any future path back is that Rolapp already extended DeChambeau a chance, and he turned it down. That single detail reframes the story. This isn't about a CEO strong-arming a player into compliance, it's about a player handed exactly the door he claims to want, who chose to leave it shut, at least for now. The terms Koepka accepted help explain why the others hesitated. Returning restored his tour access immediately, but at a real cost: no access to tour equity for 5 years. For a golfer who's already built an independent income stream worth hundreds of thousands a month, that penalty box means something very different than it would for a player with no outside revenue. DeChambeau hasn't confirmed he was offered identical terms, but the pattern across other returning LIV players suggests any deal on the table carries something similar, a detail that may explain his hesitation better than any single meeting could. The real reason DeChambeau can afford to say no lives outside the golf course. He's kept his name attached to the ongoing antitrust lawsuit against the tour, a legal wrinkle that complicates any quiet return. And unlike Koepka, who accepted the 5-year equity restriction, DeChambeau has shown no urgency to sign onto anything similar. His backup plan stopped being a backup plan a while ago. By 2026, analysts estimated his YouTube channel alone was pulling in roughly $800,000 annually from ad revenue across about 20 million monthly views, before brand deals, merchandise, or sponsorships. He said as much himself, that he could simply do YouTube golf and be completely fine. That figure is just one piece of a broader operation built entirely outside the tour. As captain of his LIV team, Crushers GC, DeChambeau signed a long-term apparel deal with Reebok in December 2024, becoming the face of the brand's return to golf. 7 months later, in July 2025, he added a multi-year Qualcomm partnership built around content creation rather than a simple logo placement. Crushers GC itself, with teammates Paul Casey, Charles Howell III, and Anirban Lahiri, has racked up 5 team titles, including the 2023 Team Championship. None of that depends on holding a PGA Tour card. Every sponsor, every partnership, every dollar exists whether or not Rolapp ever picks up the phone. That confidence hasn't gone over well with everyone covering the sport. Golf commentator Eamon Lynch pushed back hard, arguing DeChambeau has lost touch with how much real negotiating power he holds. Lynch's broader point is that DeChambeau's position weakened the moment LIV Golf's backer, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, signaled plans to pull its funding at the end of the 2026 season. That detail changes the entire leverage calculation. As long as LIV had Saudi money behind it, a tour return was purely optional. Once that funding disappears, the math gets far more urgent, for him and every other LIV player watching the same headlines. That funding threat is the real fault line beneath the whole situation. The Financial Times first surfaced PAF's plan to end its backing, and the timing landed almost perfectly alongside Rolapp being interviewed on the same subject. Asked directly whether a path back existed for players like DeChambeau and Rahm, Rolapp avoided anything resembling an ultimatum, instead pointing to what the tour already has, what he called the strongest collection of golfers in the world by rankings and viewership. That's not the language of an executive punishing a wayward star. It's the language of someone who believes he's holding the stronger hand regardless of what any individual player decides. He's also not the only LIV player facing this fork in the road. Jon Rahm, who joined LIV in 2023 on a deal reportedly worth around $300 million, was reportedly caught off guard by PF's funding decision, yet has kept paying his fines to stay eligible on the DP World Tour while focusing on competing rather than negotiating publicly. Reporting also suggests Rahm has been quietly stepping back from LIV's structure, a far quieter approach than DeChambeau's louder, content-driven leverage play. Speculation around LIV's finances intensified in 2026 when Golf Insider Ryan French reported the league was on the verge of shutting down entirely, a claim that gained traction after LIV abruptly cancelled scheduled press conferences, citing technical issues, right before an event in Mexico City. Whether a formal bankruptcy filing ever materializes, the possibility alone has shifted the tone of every conversation about players considering a tour return. Among current tour members, the divide over the two-tier system runs along entirely separate lines from the LIV question. Some veterans, like Glover, moved from public skeptic to inside advocate, turning down an invitation to the Players' Advisory Council before later running for its chairmanship, believing he could shape the outcome from within. Others, like Taylor, remain openly uneasy about losing access to marquee events depending on where the promotion and relegation math lands them. Fans have picked up on the same tension, with one widely shared take arguing the new system was built to protect the players already at the top while making it harder for anyone else to break through. Fair or not, that criticism proves the plan isn't just a story about outsiders like DeChambeau, it's reshaping expectations for players who never left the tour at all. The Future Competition Committee, chaired by Tiger Woods, sat at the center of this redesign, working alongside the Players' Advisory Council for months before the board approved the plan in June 2026. That matters because it shows the two-tier system wasn't a unilateral decree from Rolapp, it moved through committee review, player consultation, and a formal board vote. Even so, the rollout has produced genuine friction. Glover has framed the exercise around one goal: building the strongest possible version of the tour for television and fans by 2028, while acknowledging the process asked players to accept real trade-offs. Whether every player believes that goal justifies losing sponsor exemptions or being barred from second-tier events remains an open argument. Zoom out and two genuinely competing visions for the sport's future are on the table, each with real supporters. Rolapp's model treats golf as a media product that needs consistency, scarcity, and a predictable calendar to grow television and sponsorship value, the same playbook that helped broadcast rights become one of the NFL's largest revenue sources during his tenure there. DeChambeau's model treats a golfer as an independent media brand first, someone who doesn't need a single institution's platform to build an audience or stay culturally relevant. Both approaches have already proven they can work. The tour's revenue depends on the concentrated, hyper-structure Rolapp is building. DeChambeau's brand depends on the opposite instinct, independence monetized through platforms the tour has no control over. Neither side is wrong about what's worked for them individually. The disagreement is over which model should define the sport going forward, and whether one governing body can accommodate both. There's a fan-facing dimension too that neither side can sidestep. A more concentrated championship series is designed to make tour golf easier to market, addressing years of complaints about an overcrowded schedule. But that same concentration risks pushing casual fans toward exactly the kind of personality-driven content DeChambeau already produces: long drive contests, course record attempts, offbeat challenges requiring zero familiarity with the FedEx Cup race. If the tour's own structure becomes harder for newcomers to follow, players like DeChambeau could end up serving as the sport's real on-ramp for new audiences, even while sitting entirely outside its ecosystem. What separates this moment from earlier chapters of the LIV vs. Tour saga is that both sides are now operating under a genuine deadline. PAF's funding for LIV is set to end after the 2026 season, meaning every player still competing there, DeChambeau included, is running out of runway. At the same time, the Tour's two-tier system doesn't launch until 2028, leaving a full gap year in 2027 where neither the old rules nor the new ones fully apply. That gap is exactly where the quiet meetings and public statements between Rolapp and DeChambeau are unfolding right now, without a script or a guaranteed outcome for either side. That gap year raises a practical question nobody has fully answered: which tier would a returning DeChambeau even enter? The championship series sets a top 20 finish or 2 wins as the standard promotion path, a bar that assumes a player is already competing inside the system. A returning LIV star, entering cold, would need some special exemption or negotiated entry point, since the new rules eliminate the sponsor exemptions that once served that purpose. That structural gap may matter more to the outcome than any single conversation between the two men, because even if both wanted a deal finalized tomorrow, the mechanism to make it happen cleanly doesn't fully exist yet. The business calendar adds its own pressure to DeChambeau's side too. His Reebok and Qualcomm partnerships are built around his identity as a LIV Golf and Crushers GC athlete first, a content creator second, and a potential tour player a distant third. Any return would require renegotiating how those sponsorships apply to a golfer no longer competing on the platform they were signed around, the kind of detail that turns a simple yes into a months-long negotiation involving lawyers, marketing teams, and broadcast partners. None of this points to a predetermined conclusion. Rolapp has been careful in every public comment to avoid boxing himself into a firm yes or no about any individual player's return. DeChambeau has been equally careful to frame his own options as a choice rather than a plea, repeatedly signaling that golf, YouTube, or some blend of both remain equally viable paths forward. What's certain is that the outcome won't be decided by a single meeting or one dramatic moment caught on camera. It will be decided by financial pressure on LIV, the practical mechanics of a two-tier system still under construction, and whether DeChambeau ultimately concludes the tour needs him more than he needs it, or the reverse. Every prior flashpoint in the LIV vs Tour saga eventually forced a choice on the players caught in the middle. This one is no different, except the leverage on both sides now rests on numbers anyone can verify rather than rumors easy to exaggerate. Rolapp has a board-approved structure, a 2028 launch date, and a stated belief that the tour already fields the strongest roster in golf. DeChambeau has a subscriber count still climbing past 2.7 million, sponsorship deals with Reebok and Qualcomm that exist independent of any tour, and an active legal claim against the organization he might one day rejoin. Both men are negotiating from real positions, not bluffs, precisely why neither has been in any hurry to blink first.